Is the Mk8 Golf GTI Clubsport better than the car it effectively replaced, the Mk7.5 Golf GTI TCR? Hello guys, and welcome to this Volks Wizard video, which is a very special one today because in what is probably a world exclusive, we're going to answer the question every GTI enthusiast has been asking: is the Mk8 Golf GTI Clubsport better than the car it effectively replaced, the Mk7.5 Golf GTI TCR? Now in 2019 I declared the TCR my favourite Golf GTI of all time because of the way it aced the daily grind while providing mind-blowing performance both on road and track. But could the Mk8 Clubsport be even better and take its place as my favourite Golf GTI? Just after I ordered this car, the Carfection review of the Clubsport dropped, and in it Henry Catchpole rather poignantly said he didn't necessarily think the Clubsport was better than the TCR, which got me thinking maybe I shouldn't put my TCR up for sale just yet. But today, in an exclusive back-to-back test, we're going to find out for sure. Could the TCR find itself outgunned by the new car and find itself on Auto Trader, or could it still offer me something that the new car doesn't and justify its place in my garage? Well, let's start off by firstly looking at these two cars' vital statistics. Okay, let's start off then by talking about performance. Now, as you can imagine, the newer car offers a bit more on paper. So we've got 290 metric horsepower from the TCR, we've got 300 from the Clubsport, we've got 380 Newton meters of torque from the TCR, we've got 400 from the Clubsport, but interestingly it's over a slightly narrower band. So the TCR produces peak torque from 1,800 to 5,300 RPM. The Clubsport is 2,000 to 5,200 RPM. This TCR will do 162 miles an hour flat out. That's because it's a performance pack car. The base TCR does 155 restricted, and that's what the Clubsport does as well. As far as I know, as yet there's no option to raise that limiter on this car, but I'd imagine it might be a little bit faster top speed, but that really doesn't mean a lot to an awful lot of people. 0 to 60 does, but probably shouldn't. They both do 0 to 60 in 5.6 seconds, so quite a lot slower than a Golf R, but 0.2 of a second faster than the Golf GTI Clubsport S, the Nürburgring record car. And that's primarily because both these cars have got 7-speed DSG automatic gearboxes, and neither of them have got a manual option. You have to look for the 245 PS GTI to get that on the Mk8. The TCR is a little bit lighter than the Clubsport. Whether that's because the weight given is for a 3-door or not, I don't know, but it would make sense because it's only 31 kilograms heavier, the Clubsport, and they're only available as the 5-door. So this is 1,461 kilograms versus 1,430. Price-wise, well, this is quite interesting. When the TCR went out of production, when it came with the Akrapovic exhaust for the 2020 model year, it was around £37,000, and that is exactly what the Clubsport as the base car is brand new. Now on the second-hand market, things are a lot more interesting. You've got to bear in mind the latest TCRs are probably about a year older than the Clubsport, and yet prices actually aren't all that different. So this TCR, which is a sort of early one, it's a 2019 model year non-Akrapovic car. Auto Trader suggests this car with 10,000 miles is worth £29,000 today. So there are bound to be some lower mileage later cars that are more expensive. It is a performance pack car, so it's kind of a very desirable spec. This car, even months ago, I think you could buy the Mk demo for 32,000, so presumably they're a little bit cheaper now. So there's probably only not even 10% difference, probably a couple of £1,000 difference. And at some points you could find a TCR that's probably more expensive than a Clubsport. So yeah, price should not influence your decision between these two cars one bit. Okay, let's now have a look at the outside of these two very exciting Golf GTIs. Okay, firstly let's talk about the spec and the modifications that have been made to these cars so you know exactly what they should look like. So the TCR is pretty much standard. It left the factory as a performance pack with the Pretoria black wheels. You may have noticed these are grey because these are the T-Rock R wheels. That gives it a bit better stance because the offset's a little bit higher, so they fill the arches a bit more convincingly. It left the factory on Michelin Pilot Sport Cup 2 tyres, which are a very trendy tyre, but they're pretty much impractical for use in the UK all year round. So it's now on Michelin Pilot Sport 4S tyres. If it does go up for sale, it'll go back on its correct Golf Pretorias in black, so it will be 100% standard. It's got carbon fibre mirror casings, which I fitted, but these were a factory option. It's got the black roof, which was a factory option. It's got pure grey paint, which was a factory option, and combined it does make the car look really good, but it does sort of mark you out a bit as a boy racer, which is not necessarily such a great thing when you're knocking on the door of 50 years of age. Little things to point out that the TCR, because it came so late in the run, doesn't have an exclusive front bumper. It's got basically a normal GTI front bumper with clipped on spoiler, and same on the back, so these are standard bumpers. It's got a very aggressive diffuser for sure, which looks really good, probably more aggressive than the one on the Clubsport. Now the Clubsport, because it's going to be in production for a long time, it got its own exclusive front bumper. This is called the Cup bumper, so it's not like the one on the GTI 245, it's not like the one on the Golf R. So that, I guess you could say, is an upgrade over the TCR. Yeah, a lot of it is black plastic, but when it comes to replacing black plastic, it's always a lot cheaper than gloss, which is what we have down here on the TCR, though this is relatively cheap black plastic. Now on its standard 18-inch Richmond wheels, the Clubsport doesn't stand a chance against the TCR, whatever wheels the TCR's on, even the Corantas. On these Vossen wheels, it does give it a bit more presence. I particularly like the way, which is total coincidence, that the extra large honeycomb sections on the bumper tie in with the Y spokes on the wheels. When I first saw the car, that really jumped out at me, so hopefully you can see that. We've got a bit more width and offset to these wheels, so they do fill the arches a bit more. I just can't wait to get the little plastic wheel arch extenders fitted, which should be very soon. But it is a much plainer car, I guess, particularly in silver, which is a kind of butter wouldn't melt in its mouth kind of colour. But I quite like that because we've got a car that is a little bit more subtle, primarily because it's not in primer grey, but offers at least as much performance, and I like that. We've also got bigger brakes. TCR's a 340, which is no bigger than the GTI Performance, it's just that they were 2-piece. On the Clubsport, we've got 357mm brake discs, so usefully larger. Again, they're 2-piece as well, so I did a track sort of morning in my TCR. The brakes held up really well actually, so these should be even better, especially considering the car isn't actually significantly heavier. We've got that decal on the side, which isn't really the coolest thing in the world, is it? I'm pretty sure that when this car was called Cup, they decided to put Cup on the back doors. Then when they decided to call it Clubsport, they cancelled that and just left the back doors blank. So I'd love to get a Cup sort of decal made with the italic of the stripe on the front, just says Cup on the side there. I think that would look really cool. On the back, yeah, well, we've got a proper 2-piece spoiler. I think it's probably shared with the R Performance Pack and the Edition 45, but it's still a really nice spoiler and harks back to the one on the Clubsport Mark 7 and Clubsport S. The TCR, unfortunately, has just got a standard spoiler from a GTI Performance with a little bit stuck on it, which is a bit of a shame really, considering how good the one was on the Clubsport Mark 7. But there you go, it's gloss black at least. We've got normal mirror casings. I don't know if you can spec them in black or any other type, I didn't notice that. We've got a standard colour roof because there's no option to change it. Maybe all that will come with Edition 45. At the back we've got oval exhaust tips, which is exclusive to the Clubsport. The diffuser's not as aggressive as the one on the TCR, and again, it's black plastic. I mean, look at that TCR one, that really is pretty full on, although the exhaust tips are a bit smaller. So yeah, I mean, the wheels do help this car. On the Richmond it is pretty dreadful, but I guess on the Adelaide it would look pretty decent as well. You can spec those for under £1,000. We've got black plastic on the sill covers, not gloss black. Yeah, okay, well, TCR sort of wins, I think, when it comes to looking hard. But will it start to date? Well, yeah, let's see what happens. Okay, let's now have a look inside these two GTIs. Okay, let's start off then by having a look inside the TCR. So I've done about 6,000 miles in that seat just there, and I've enjoyed every single one of them. The 7.5 interior is really good, and with the TCR bits, it's just such a special place. Okay, they're not particularly bolstered, these seats, but look at that, we've got 4 different fabrics. We've got this unique cloth, we've got Alcantara, we've got fake leather, and we've got normal cloth as well. Lots of red stitching everywhere. Door cards have got this lovely Alcantara as well, which is missing unfortunately from the Clubsport. We've got red stitching there. We've got stainless pedals. I have to admit, I have fitted that stainless dead pedal there. That's not standard. We've got red trimmed floor mats. These are actually not TCR ones. I'm preserving those outside of the car, but you do get a nice thick floor mat with a red edge to it and a little GTI tab as standard, so that's a nice touch. Steering wheel is unique to TCR, so it's got a dead ahead marker there, it's got perforations. Okay, it's not Alcantara. Alcantara wheels are really cool, but they're not very practical, to be honest, because they get really dirty very quickly, and with all this hand sanitizer going around, I think I would rather have this. Ambient lighting in the sills and in the doors, not in the dash or in the back. Even if it's a 5-door, you don't get it in the back, so bear that in mind. Black headlining looks, you know, pretty sporty, but with the lighter bits on the seats, it's not, you know, a cold bunker cabin like some cars can be. So being a 7.5, it's basically a Mark 7 dashboard, which has been around for almost 10 years now, but there are some pushed in upgrades. So we've got the active info display there, which is a digital instrument cluster. That does bring the car well into the modern age. We've got a bigger header unit than Mark 7, which again is pretty cool. It's also got Apple CarPlay, so you could get that on the last of the Mark 7s, but the screen as standard was pretty small. So it's a really good cabin. Got knobs for climates. We've got a selection of knobs there as well, and a few buttons down here, so driving modes, start stop system, traction control, parking sensors. It's a really nice interior. Okay, let's have a look in the somewhat infamous Mark 8. Firstly, I'm not convinced that door opens with the same reassuring noise the 7.5 and earlier Golfs have made. Let's just check that out. Yeah, there's definitely something lacking there. Also, we've got a lovely smooth edge here, while on the Mark 8s, there's a rough edge. And that was actually on the last gen Leon. I'm pretty sure it's on the current Leon as well. So you touch that every time you push the door shut, so that's a bit of a pity. Door cards really not as special as those on the TCR, so we've just got this plain grey. It couldn't be any less interesting. There's no red on here, so yeah, okay, there's a bit of the honeycomb on there, but something is definitely needed down here to brighten it up. Maybe edition 45 will give you that. Thankfully we've got stainless pedals, and thankfully I reckon that dead pedal can be swapped for the one that's on the earlier car, because these are basically still a Mark 7.5 when it comes to the underpinnings. It's the MQB platform. We have got a bit of red trim on the mats there. The seats, well, arguably, because they're a sort of pseudo buckety type seats, you could say these are more interesting. They don't say GTI on them though, which I think is a bit of a pity. But again, we've got this sort of, they call it art velour, so this is probably more velour than Alcantara. And there's a grippy fabric there, there's some fake leather there, which actually goes around to the back of the seat. There's no cloth as such on here like there is on the TCR, which goes all the way around the back of it. Steering wheel is a bit flat bottom, it's got lots of red on it, so effort has been made there. Okay, well, here we are inside the Mk8 Golf GTI. So I've done just over 1,000 miles in this car. That's why this video has taken a few weeks to make, because I wanted to run this car in before I put it up against the TCR. It's really hard to explain why this doesn't feel any worse than the one in the 7.5. It's got a lovely sort of minimalism to it, which is very soothing. And as a lot of the reviews have said, the quality of materials is very, very good. Okay, the touchscreen is a bit Marmite, to say the least. It was part of the reason why Henry Catchpole didn't think the TCR was trounced by this car. My view on it after driving many of these for nearly the last year is that it does get a lot better when you become familiar with it. You have to configure it, but basically it's like a smartphone. We all pretty much use a smartphone. If you don't use a smartphone, you won't get on with it. If you do, you're kind of halfway there already. But configuring the system to suit your needs is key, and that's not really been talked about much, so let's quickly do that now. So, little trick. These sliders here have been universally disliked because they're not illuminated at night. That was a bit of an oversight by Volkswagen. Firstly, audio. As a driver, you would not need to use those because you've got it here. So I think in Dan Prost's piston head review of the R, he complained about that, but then he kind of failed to see that this was right here. Okay, the climate control ones you probably have more need for, and at certain times when you're not actually driving, say you're in traffic, it's quite easy to just drop on them like that, and just a little tap of the finger, you're up and down half a degree. But if you're driving along and it's dark and you can't see that, should you need to see it, because I think you can probably do it with touch quite easily. I'm going to shut my eyes now, so I'm going to go up a couple of degrees, I'm going to go down a couple of degrees with my eyes shut. So I reckon, again, with familiarity, you don't actually need the illumination, but if you do, something probably not many people have told you, if you touch this, you get straight into the display and you can slide up and down like that. It really is easy to slide when you're driving because you're pushing into the screen to locate your finger. So just in and out like that. Okay, the other trick is, like on an iPhone, you've got the command center thing where you slide up from the bottom. On this, slide down from the top, and here these are configurable. Now in this car, the ESC on and off has been configured to be just that slide away. So on the TCR, to fully disable TC, ESC, I reckon you're holding your finger on that button for quite a long time. On this, 3 seconds. I timed that as before, so I'd say that's actually quicker, but you do have to A, know this screen exists, and B, configure it. So if you hold on to that, so I can choose any of these things here to be a shortcut in this pull down menu. So we've got start stop as well. That's another thing a lot of people like to use. There's no button for it down here, but all you need to do, drag down, and there, it's off. So like a smartphone, you can get it to do what you want. So with a bit of familiarity, a bit of configuration, I genuinely think, and I've always thought this before I even bought this car, so bear that in mind. Back in June you'll see the review of the Mk8 Golf Style. I think this is the way forward. Okay, before we go and do the driving of these cars, which is something I've really been looking forward to, I just want to tell you what you get and what you don't get with the Mk8, so you can see exactly what spec changes there are over the 7.5 TCR. Okay, there's been a lot of talk about the Mk8 being a cost-saving exercise from Volkswagen, and of course, you know, in certain areas that is true, but it's not all negative. There are some things you get on the Mk8 you don't get on the TCR, but likewise there are a few things missing from the Mk8 you do get on the TCR. So let's start off with the Mk8, what you do get. So you get a heated steering wheel as standard. which is a nice touch. It's a 3-stage thing. You get wireless phone charging now, so you just put the phone in the center console and it automatically charges. You also get wireless CarPlay, so no messing around with a charging cable anymore unless you want to. There are still 2 USB ports there, so say your passengers want to charge up, they can do. You get the bucket type seats, which are a little bit more interesting than the ones in the TCR in their shape, a little bit sportier looking. You get side assist blind spot monitoring on the Mk8 as standard, which I've used on Audis before and I love it because it just flashes when a car is in your blind spot, and anything to help you not have an accident has got to be a good thing. That's free on the Mk8. I think it was a very rare option on Mk7, probably 7.5 as well. You get bigger brakes, as I mentioned earlier, so 357mm versus 340. That would be quite a significant upgrade if you had to pay for it. You get LED matrix headlights on the Mk8, which are a little bit cleverer than the normal LEDs on the 7.5. They're called the IQ light. You're able to disable keyless entry on the Mk8 just through the infotainment system, so that helps with the security of the car, which has always been a problem with cars with keyless entry. You get door handle lighting on the Mk8. You get, I think, 30 colour ambient lighting on the interior, and that's in the back doors, front doors and the dashboard. Okay, it's not in the sills, but it's much more visible. You get 3-zone climate control, which means that the rear section is also its own little climate zone. You don't get that on 7.5. You get a more advanced assist system, so you get travel assist, which is sort of almost semi-autonomous driving. You have to have your hand on the steering wheel, but it will maintain the lane for you and do adaptive cruise control, so that's pretty cool. You also get adaptive cruise control with predictive speed detection, so it uses GPS to know what speed limits are coming and slows the car down and speeds them up, and it will also read the road signs, so there's a temporary speed limit on a road, it will adjust the speed to that. That's pretty cool. What you do lose, though, rather annoyingly for me, are the heated seats, which depends which way you look at it really. They're available as an option, not too expensive. You've got to bear in mind this is a very early Mk8. When the Mk7 came out, it had pretty much nothing apart from adaptive cruise control as standard, so I don't think we're doing too badly considering it's a new model. You lose the space saver spare wheel, which you can again spec in for about £125. You lose the rear camera, which was standard towards the end of 7.5 run. You lose the CD player. You can't put the navigation in the instrument cluster on the Mk8, which is a bit of a moot point, unless you probably pay extra, that is, because if you're using CarPlay that doesn't matter. There's no sunglasses holder. So yeah, they deleted this. I just think they want you to think the car is different. It's not 7.5, even though it really is deep down. So by putting this in there, you end up with the same roof moulding. Oh, where they've gone. And it just looked too similar. So yeah, okay, you might think it's cost cutting, but I just think it's to be different. Likewise with the cubby under the headlight switch, which is really handy for microfibers to clean the screens. That's gone as well. I think Matt Pryor on his recent Autocar review said, what is this slot for, a fan or something? Well, I think that's it really. It gets wider because it gives you a bit of flexibility in the size of your glasses, but they seem to fit really well, and bearing in mind it's not there anymore, it would make a lot of sense. So down here, no locker, but I'm going to store my microfiber in there. So yeah, famously, because of the chap who made the video back in the summer, we've now got a manual bonnet strut, but we've actually got 2 bonnet catches. And I'm pretty sure if you top the price up of those from Volkswagen, that would cost more than a telescopic strut on the 7.5. And just 1 middle bonnet catch. If you're bored and you work for Volkswagen parts, get in touch. I would really love to know, because I have a feeling that catch, the extra catch on the 8, is going to cost more than the difference between the manual strut and a telescopic strut on the 7.5. Anyway guys, enough geekery now. I think it's time to go and drive these two top GTIs. Okay, well let's start off then with my Golf GTI TCR, seeing as I know it so well. And yeah, it doesn't feel completely dissimilar to the Clubsport from behind the wheel. This car's got dynamic chassis control because it's a performance pack car, and I tend to run it in individual mode with everything set to sport apart from chassis, which is in comfort. And even then you realise it's still quite a firm ride, particularly with these 19-inch wheels fitted, so it's still quite busy. It doesn't feel any slower than the Clubsport really. Gearbox feels pretty similar. I mean, 7-speed DSG is incredibly fast and smooth, and it's got all that. We've got the steering in sports, and I don't think it feels as direct as the one in the Clubsport. When you get into corners like that, you can feel more of a sensation of the weight going on the front axle, which is probably where these cars are different. It feels good, but it doesn't feel as neutral as the Clubsport. Tip the Clubsport in like this, and you'll feel the back ever so slightly coming around to help you around, and this doesn't do that, and it kind of behaves like that on track, where it pushes into understeer. A bit disappointingly, you wouldn't really feel it on the road, but on the track I've got a feeling the Clubsport will absolutely trounce this car. On these 19s, the road noise is pretty well subdued, so it's good. And yeah, it's firm in comfort mode, but it's not excessive, so it's still a great showing from my trusty old TCR. Yeah, there's barely anything in it performance wise, I'd say. Maybe the gearbox downshifts are a little bit quicker in the new car, but I think the only way to tell for sure is to go and drive it. So let's go and do that now. Okay, well, first impressions is that it feels pretty similar, but then it also feels different in some key ways. It's when you really push this car that it shows its hand. Firstly, I reckon the engine feels a little bit more urgent, maybe not ultimately any more powerful, but just a little bit sharper, a little less laggy. And when you want to downshift like now, and you really do, it just gives it to you. I reckon that's a little bit quicker. But the key change for me is the chassis. So before, when you'd come into a corner like this as right-hander, you'd feel a lot of weight on the front axle, and now you feel the back helping you around, which is really useful because there's a hedge there. And like now, again, confidence. The rear axle really influencing the way the car corners, and that's distinctly different. So yeah, it's a much more neutral, much more adjustable car. I reckon in the wet, you've got to be really careful, because I've driven it in the wet, and if you lift off when you turn into a roundabout, the back will step out, ESC will catch it. If you turn into corners, which sometimes you have to do on the brakes because something's there that you don't expect it, when you don't expect it, then the car will sort of step out. But that is part and parcel of the car being adjustable, and basically the driver being able to influence the car in corners. So yeah, I reckon on the road this car feels a lot more confidence inspiring, it feels a lot more exciting. On the track it should feel a lot more engaging, in that you will take a bit of time to get the best out of it. It won't just push into understeer, and for me that's the big appeal. This car's on passive dampers, which, okay, they're less sophisticated than the ones on the TCR with DCC, but the damping on them is incredible. And what's quite surprising is that the ride quality, even on this 19-inch Vossen wheels, doesn't feel that different to the TCR. Well, certainly not in normal mode, but it's not an awful lot less comfortable than the TCR was in comfort mode. So yeah, and the beauty of it is when you go for the modes, the dampers do not change. So we're in full-on sport now. We've got the sport gearbox, we've got sport steering, sport engine, sport diff, and we don't have to worry about the dampers being too hard for the road because they're in one set position. The thing about DCC is that it changes the damping, but it doesn't change the spring rate, and the spring rates on the TCR are quite hard. They're quite hard on this car as well, so they don't feel completely dissimilar. So yeah, from a driving perspective, TCR is good, but I would say this is a lot more exciting and engaging, and it will finally take the fight to the i30N, Focus, ST and the Honda Civic Type R, which the TCR, for all its other strengths, never really got that close to. So turning on the brakes, whoa, see, it's really, really edgy. I quite like that, but yeah, care is needed. When I've been driving this car and getting a feel for it, there's one word that springs to mind, and that is size, S-C-Y-T-H-E, the way it just goes through these corners with such neutrality. Oh, it's just so exciting. Oh. Oh. And if you're really mad and you want to turn the ESC off, this is how quick you can do it. So pull down, ESC system off, confirm, bong, off. It's about 3 seconds while I'm driving. So I'll turn that back on, activated. Let's do that again then. So I'm staying in my lane, down, ESC off, confirm, bong. Okay guys, we're on to day 2 now, because day 1 was a full day of testing and I wanted to sleep on the results so I could come to a very clear conclusion, because this is a very important video. The winner will become my favourite Golf GTI of all time, no less. Let's start off then by talking about the looks. I think 7.5 TCR, particularly in this spec, is a very good looking car. It will date over time for sure, but because it's so good looking now, I don't think it will date too badly. I don't think the design of the Mk8 works as well, but I think in Clubsport spec with the right wheels it still looks good, and I love the way this car in silver is relatively subtle, but it packs at least the same amount of firepower as the TCR. On to the interior then. Well, it was a brave move from Volkswagen to do a revolution and not an evolution in there. When I first drove a Mk8 back in June, it took me a bit of time to get used to the interior, but I did, and when I gave it back I got in my 7.5 and it felt very, very dated. It does take a bit of time to get to know its ways, and you have to configure it to suit your needs, but once you do that, it's great. It's basically just like a smartphone. It's in a really good position on the dashboard. The fact you can turn the ESC on and off more quickly in the Mk8 via the touchscreen than you can in the 7.5 via its button designed just for doing that just shows you how good it can be when you get to know it. Spec wise, there are pros and cons. You lose some things, you gain others, but the bits you miss you can add relatively inexpensively to the Mk8. So I think all in all it's not bad. Under the bonnet, things haven't changed an awful lot on paper. They're still packing roughly the same amount of power. They've got roughly the same gearboxes, and they've both got the VAQ front differential. I think that's because 300 horsepower really is a comfortable limit for a front wheel drive car. But when you drive them back to back, you do notice the engine feels sharper in here, the gearbox feels sharper, so throttle response is crisper, gears are delivered more readily in the newer car, and that is rather nice. And then we move on to the chassis. I moved to Warwickshire from the city just over a year ago. I was always into exploring a car's ride and handling, but living out here on some amazing roads that Jaguar Land Rover and Aston Martin use for test routes gives me the opportunity to indulge in that fetish even more. And when I first drove the 245 PS Mk8 back in the autumn, it blew me away. I could not believe what they'd done with a chassis. Suddenly all those reviews where the TCR was criticised for being boring made sense, because the Mk8 GTI was so much more exciting. And I couldn't wait for the Clubsport to come, and it really does not disappoint. The big question is though, have Volkswagen thrown the baby out with the bathwater? Have they traded too much of the Golf's USP, its daily usability, to go and have a shot at the hot hatch crown? Well, I don't think so. It is firm for sure, but actually when you drive it on a variety of roads, you realise the damping is so sophisticated, it never ever becomes crashy, which was a real surprise to me, even on these 19-inch wheels. The other change is in the way the car feels into corners. So the turn-in phase of the corner is really, really important, and there does feel like there's a lot of front axle weight on this car when you turn in. Turning in this car, same corner, same conditions. We've been lucky to have dry weather for this test because these cars really do lap it up. There haven't been many tests of this car actually on dry, warm roads. Turn into the corner with this car with confidence, and it doesn't half feel neutral. You don't really feel the front of the car weighing up, you feel the back come into play, and yeah, there's this bit in your head when you turn in and you're just hoping it will turn and do what you want it to do, and most of the time this car does it, but there is this feeling of doubt. There is no doubt in this car. It is truly incredible in the chassis department, and whilst the TCR might be seen as a more special car by a lot of people, what this car does on the road means a lot more to me, and that's why it is the best Golf GTI of all time, for me at least. So if you're looking for a Golf GTI TCR, have a look at Auto Trader, because this car will be on it right now. So guys, thanks as ever for watching this Volks Wizard video. If you've enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up, please do comment, please do share. As ever, please do subscribe and click that bell notification icon, because the next challenge for the Clubsport is its big brother, the Volkswagen Golf R, which will be here in just 24 hours thanks to the generosity of Volkswagen UK. So see you for that very soon.